Welcome to episode number 3, Divine Equation Scrolls Ruach Edition by Audrea V. This book presents a spiritual perspective on breath, wind, and movement, framing them as divine concepts with inherent mathematics and equations. The book is dedicated to intercessors and prophetic individuals, explaining how breath is foundational to spiritual life, prayer, and prophetic action. It explores concepts like breath as divine exchange, wind as prophetic transport, and rhythmic breathing in intercession, suggesting that these elements are not random, but follow spiritual algorithms and patterns for divine motion and acceleration. Tune in as we take a deep dive into the Ruach fundamentals of prayer.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take sources and really get into them and pull out the key ideas for you.
And today we're looking at a really interesting...
Right, and the subtitle really grabs you. Divine Formulas of Breath, Wind, and Prophetic Movement.
So our mission today isn't just to, summarize this document. It's more about exploring its core ideas.
Yeah, we want to unpack what the scrolls say about the spiritual side of breath and wind.
And crucially, what that might mean for you, for how you understand your own spiritual life, maybe even your purpose.
Absolutely. So maybe to take a second now.
Yeah.
Think about a time you felt, really connected spiritually.
Could be prayer, could be just a quiet moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What did that feel like? Just kind of hold that feeling.
Because some of the ideas we're about to discuss might offer a different lens on those very experiences.
Okay, ready to dive in.
Let's do it. The scrolls start with this pretty foundational concept, breath as the first math.
The first math. Okay, in the divine economy, it says.
Yeah, it's this idea that even before, physical stuff, there was breath, spirit moving.
So it reframes grading not just as biological necessity.
Exactly. But as the starting point for life, for divine action, it's fundamental.
It makes me think straight away of Genesis 2.7, God breathing life into Adam.
Right. But the scrolls push that further. They say it wasn't just making him alive, like flipping a switch.
Okay.
It was an activation. Loading him up with, the text says, intelligence, direction, and spiritual propulsion.
Wow. Like the divine code being switched on.
That's the term they use, yeah. And this leads right into their first divine equation, R001.
Yeah.
Breath plus vision, breath plus
vision. Okay.
And the example given is the spirit hovering over the waters back in Genesis, not just floating there, but actively starting creation.
I see. So the idea is if our breath, this inherent code, lines up with a clear spiritual vision,
then things can happen that are beyond just the everyday. Supernatural movement, like energy hitting a target.
That's a good way to think about it. And then they break down just normal breathing. Inhale, exhale.
Into something quite profound, actually. Divine equation R002, inhale, which is receiving, plus exhale, which is releasing.
Equals divine exchange. So it's not just air in, air out.
No. Every single breath becomes this potential moment of spiritual transaction, receiving something, releasing something else.
It's asking us to see breathing less passively, right? More like a constant spiritual operation.
Yes. And that original breath, the one God breathed into Adam with that blueprint. The scrolls suggest it's kind of been passed down. It's in us.
Like each breath carries a tiny piece of that first creative moment.
Sort of, yeah. That's the implication.
Okay, then it gets into the Hebrew words, Ruach and Neshama. I found this part really helpful.
Me too. They're not just synonyms for breath.
Right, Ruach is more dynamic. Spirit, wind, breath, air, movement.
Yeah.
That active force.
Exactly. And Neshama is described as the soul breath, linked to divine consciousness, intellect, almost like God's mind within us.
So different layers of the same thing.
Different but connected aspects, yeah. Which brings us to equation R003.
Let me guess. Combining them.
You got it. Ruach, the movement part, plus Neshama, the divine intellect part, equals purpose in motion.
Purpose in motion. So when the energy connects with the understanding.
We move from just being to being directed, assigned even. You've got the power and the GPS, basically.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And this leads into prayer.
It does, specifically moving beyond just saying words.
To what they call vibrational prayer, like Romans 8.26, the groanings too deep for words.
Exactly, where your breath itself starts to pray, the deepest part of you connecting directly.
So prayer becomes more than just mental or verbal.
Right. In really deep intercession, the scrolls suggest our breath, its rhythm, even maybe physical posture, it all becomes a channel.
Which is captured in divine equation R004.
No.
Breath plus burden, intercessory travail.
And travail here is defined as breath under weight.
Breath under weight, like labor.
Sort of. The idea is when you carry a heavy spiritual burden and you yield your breath in that prayer, it's like a spiritual birthing process.
Yeah.
Intense, focused effort.
That's a really potent image. And then the power of just one breath.
Huge focus on that. Divine equation R005. One breath multiplied by divine purpose equals a legacy shift.
Wow. And the examples.
Adam's first breath, the wind at Pentecost launching the church, Ezekiel breathing life into the dry bones.
All single moments of breath or wind, but with massive, lasting impact.
It really drives home that even one act, if it's perfectly aligned and, Ruach powered, can ripple outwards exponentially.
It's a reminder not to discount the small acts of obedience, maybe.
Absolutely. And they even include an activation exercise to make it practical.
Yeah, encouraging us to just notice our breathing.
The count of the inhale, the exhale, thinking about what you might be receiving, what you might be releasing.
Declaring that exchange, it says. Recognizing the code, the rhythm, right there.
It's about shifting awareness, seeing your breath not just as automatic, but as this continuous divine interaction, a step in a divine algorithm.
Okay, algorithms.
Yeah.
We'll get there. But first, shifting from breath inside us to wind outside.
Right. The scrolls present wind as way more than just weather.
A prophetic transport system.
Yeah.
Carrying direction, data, divine intent. This is where it gets really fascinating for me.
It is interesting. The idea is that the Ruach, the spirit wind, isn't random. It has purpose, direction.
Leading to divine equation, R006. Wind plus word, prophetic flow.
And the key bit there is speaking to the wind, like Ezekiel was told to do.
Prophecy to the wind.
Yeah. The concept is, when God's wind meets God's word, spoken in faith by us, it activates things. It creates movement.
Ezekiel 37 again. Those bones only came alive when the wind heard his words, right?
Exactly, that responsiveness. And then it introduces the four winds.
The prophetic compass of heaven.
Yeah, each with a meaning. East, judgment, transition.
Cool.
West, reversal, removal. North, hidden things, glory, refreshing. South, warmth, favor, growth.
It's like reading the spiritual weather map.
Kind of. Discerning which wind is blowing gives insight into the spiritual season, according to this framework.
And when they all come together, R007.
North plus south plus east plus west equal divine alignment. Not chaos, but convergence. Gathering, positioning, harmony.
All the elements working together purposefully.
But then there's a caution. John 3.8, the wind blows where it wishes.
It's unpredictable.
Which leads to R008. Spirit wind plus flexibility, prophetic precision.
So if we're too rigid, we miss it.
That's the idea. Being flexible, like a sailboat adjusting its sails, allows us to catch the Spirit's movement, even if it's surprising.
It requires surrender then, not trying to control it.
Exactly. The more open we are, the scroll suggests, the more precisely we step into what God's doing.
Okay. And then wind is transportation, like Philip in Acts 8.
Yeah, that's the prime example, which gives us divine equation R009, obedience plus wind, supernatural relocation.
So our obedience kind of unlocks that possibility.
It opens the way, allows the Ruach to potentially carry us, physically or circumstantially, beyond natural limits. It's about partnership. Our obedience is our yes.
Okay, wow. So now the scrolls circle back to breathing, but specifically for intercession.
Right, intercessory breathing patterns, moving beyond words again to the meaning in groans, deep breaths, back to Romans 8.26.
And they repeat an equation here, don't they? R010.
They do. Breath plus burden, intercessory travail. Really cementing that link between carrying that spiritual weight and how our breath engages with it.
It talks about syncing our breath with God's groan.
Yeah.
Turning the intercessor into a living birthing room.
It's a very intense image, that feeling, maybe you felt it, that urge to just groan or weep in prayer. The scrolls frame that not just as emotion, but maybe as being enlisted into something deeper.
And then mapping the actual breath. Inhale and exhale in prayer.
Yeah, R001. And inhale, receiving the burden, strategy, presence, plus exhale, releasing breakthrough, decree, travail, prophetic intercession.
So our breath becomes part of the agreement, part of the action.
A weapon of agreement, they call it. It's active participation, not just asking.
Does it mention the rhythm? Sometimes in prayer, breathing just changes pace.
It does. Short exhales for deliverance, maybe long inhales for soaking, even holding the breath for restraint.
And there's an equation for that too.
R012. Rhythmic breathing plus prophetic focus equals sustained flow. The idea is that finding that spiritual rhythm combined with focus helps sustain prayer without burnout.
finding a natural cadence for connection.
It highlights how intuitive and even physical deep prayer can be. Our bodies respond.
And even sighs, they have meaning.
Apparently so. Breath as a holy signal or prophetic Morse code, referencing Psalm 38.9.
Which leads to R042, sighs plus surrender, divine signal.
So even when we're weary, overwhelmed, just sighing in surrender, that communicates something profound.
That's actually quite comforting, that even wordless moments speak.
A form of saying, your will be done, perhaps.
Okay, now for those prophetic algorithms of movement, this sounds complex.
It's about patterns. The idea that spiritual movement isn't random, it follows a kind of divine code, based on timing, steps, instructions.
Like a recipe or a computer program, an algorithm.
That's the analogy, yeah. Steps leading to a result. And they propose spiritual movements often have this encoded precision.
R012 lays out a sequence, sound plus wind plus instruction, prophetic movement.
Right, using Acts 2 as an example. The sound of wind, then the Spirit's outpouring. There's an order.
A divine protocol. Sound, then spirit movement, then specific guidance.
And they list examples. Abraham leaving home, Moses and the Exodus, David's battle plans, Jesus raising Lazarus.
Suggesting these weren't just random miracles, but follow specific divine steps.
Highlighting the intentionality. There's a pattern, even if we don't see it immediately.
Which brings us to R015. Obedience plus timing, divine motion. Both are needed.
Absolutely crucial, the scrolls emphasize. Right actions at the wrong time or wrong actions at the right time. Neither works optimally. It's about being responsive and punctual in the Spirit.
That synergy between our yes and God's when.
Precisely. And then this idea of designing with the wind.
Like being spiritual engineers.
Yeah.
Instructing the wind. Like Ezekiel.
Yeah. Captured in R016, prophetic blueprint plus breath activation, constructed movement.
So we get the vision, the blueprint from God.
And then we breathe on it with prayer, decrees, activating it, participating in its construction.
Co-laboring, helping build what God has shown us.
It definitely elevates the role of the intercessor, beyond just asking to actively partnering.
And finally here, living in algorithmic awareness. What does that mean?
Basically tuning in, becoming sensitive to the Spirit's prompts, recognizing the patterns, knowing which step you're on in the sequence.
R007. Sequence plus submission, prophetic accuracy. Following the steps, even if they seem illogical.
That's the challenge, isn't it? Trusting the divine order, submitting to the process, even when it doesn't make sense to our limited view.
Okay, a lot to take in there. The final section, pneuma-fueled acceleration.
Right. Using the Greek word pneuma, spirit, breath, wind.
As the force for moving faster than normal, beyond natural progress.
Exactly, divine propulsion. Powered by the Ruach, breaking through natural timelines. R01 puts it vividly, breath plus fire, acceleration.
Pentecost again. Wind and fire leading to explosive growth.
Yes, 120 filled, Peter preaches, 3,000 saved. Bam! That's acceleration. The fire purges and empowers, the wind propels.
And this acceleration can break delays.
That's the idea. R019, surrender plus momentum, supernatural speed. When we let go of control.
Like Elijah outrunning the chariot.
That's the picture. Caught up in divine momentum through surrender. True acceleration isn't about striving harder, but yielding more.
It mentions spiritual velocity, speed and direction, aligned with heaven.
And this acceleration closes the gap between where we are and where our purpose needs us to be.
Examples like Joseph, prison to palace, Esther becoming queen, Jesus after baptism.
All examples of seemingly sudden shifts captured in R020, hiddenness plus divine timing, public acceleration.
So those hidden times of preparation aren't wasted.
No, they're essential. They build potential energy for that divine catapult moment.
And this acceleration brings everything else into line too. Resources people.
That's what R021 suggests. Wind plus word plus willing vessel equals destiny fulfillment. It's the synergy.
God's spirit moving, his word guiding, and our hearts being open.
That combination propels us into destiny, maybe faster than we thought possible. It ties everything together.
Wow. Okay. So wrapping up this deep dive into the divine equation scrolls.
The core message really comes through, doesn't it? Breath and wind aren't just mundane. They're packed with spiritual significance, with power.
And by exploring this, as the scrolls might put it, you've kind of inhaled a movement.
You've looked at this Ruach mathematics where breath is a blueprint, movement follows patterns.
And the scrolls suggest you're not just a listener. You're potentially a recorder, right? A living scroll yourself.
Imbued with that same Ruach, that divine breath and spirit.
Which leads to, well, some big questions for you to reflect on.
Yeah. Like, what will your breath build? What winds are you going to engage with?
Which equation maybe resonates most with you right now? Which one will you carry forward?
Your life, your journey. It's your unique scroll being written.
So maybe take a deep breath
Yeah.
and just consider, what new chapter might you be inspired to write now?
Thank you for joining us for episode number 3, Divine Equation Scrolls, Ruach Edition. Stay tuned weekly as we release more from the Ruach podcast series. You can register for the Ruach School of Prayer by visiting us online at theambassadorsinstitute.org/RSOP. We look forward to helping you reach deeper realms in prayer.